What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Quality Talks podcast. I hope you're all doing well. I've got another special guest with us this evening who I'll introduce in a moment. But as always, I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody for watching, listening, subscribing, sharing, commenting. We're shipping more and more episodes as quickly as we possibly can. And we're heading into the new year as well. So what's 2026 has got coming, we don't know yet. But I'm sure we're going to have a lot of exciting content, a lot of new guests on. Obviously, we want to do more live events as well. So if there's anybody out there that wants to sponsor any of those live events, please do so. And we can't make them happen without the sponsors and such like. But so exciting year to come. But what's going on in this episode? So as I say, I'm going to introduce our guest in a moment. But we're going to be talking around the topic of sort of the automation first trap, if you like, and often the journey that teams may go on when looking to improve their products, improve their productivity, improve the quality of what they do and the testing that they do, but focus in on going at it from an automation first perspective or thinking about automation first, when actually there's other things that you can and should probably improve. So we're going to be talking around on that sort of topic. And my guest is Megan Ozanne. Hopefully I've pronounced that right. So I'm going to bring Megan on now so she can introduce herself. How you doing, Megan?
Thanks, Stu. Great to be here. I hope you're doing well as well.
I am, yeah. And did I pronounce your surname correctly? Yeah. Oh, good. Oh, it always makes me nervous. Surnames make me mine's easy. Nobody can really get my surname wrong. Apart from actually, whenever I go anywhere and they ask me for my name, I always spell my surname. I don't know why. I just say Stuart Day, D-A-Y. It is like, it's a bit random, but there you go. Megan, obviously I know you well because we have conversations on a regular basis, right? So we're doing a
Yeah,
bit of
we do.
mentoring and stuff like that. So it's lovely to have you on the show. So finally convinced you to join, which was good. But for those that don't know who you are, would you like to just introduce yourself to the audience?
So I'm Megan. I'm the QA lead at Clue Software, which is a super exciting product all around making society safer. I've been in the industry just over 10 years, with most of that focusing on leadership roles and looking at this automation first approach and how companies can go down that path. So that's pretty much me. For those of you that don't know and want to know a bit more interesting detail, I started off in horse racing before coming into
You
testing and
did.
QA, so that's always an interesting talking point. But yeah, I'll hand back over to you, Stu, if that's okay.
Yeah, well, we definitely need to get onto that change of like how that shift happened at some point, definitely. Um, so yeah, so thank you for joining, Megan. And obviously we've been speaking for a little bit around you coming on and what we could talk about, and then this sort of topic came up around sort of the automation first approaches, but your experience from sort of being in leadership type roles and being dropped into these types of situations. So we thought we'd talk about what that looks like from your perspective and the learnings that you've taken over that time and how people can avoid that trap, because it can just be a bit of a trap, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So just digging into it from your perspective, Megan, it's like in the roles that you've had over the years, what's been the biggest thing you've faced into when it comes to this sort of automation first type approach?
Yeah, so that's an interesting and a huge question. I mean, it's not a
It is.
simple answer.
No.
But yeah, it's very interesting because you get brought into a company and they just expect you to get the team up to speed, get everything shifted over to an automation first approach without necessarily looking at the bigger picture.
Hmm.
And so many times you spend so much time with the team, upskilling them, educating them, working with them to grow their confidence in automation and shift this approach. But then at the end of the day, it turns out we can't actually do this because we've got so many other problems that we need to resolve to make us more
Hmm.
efficient. And
Yeah.
the overarching thing that I keep coming back to, whatever company I'm in, is that we don't need to be fixing the automation suite. Yes, it needs work. Yes, this automation needs work, but we need to
Hmm.
fix the conversations that the teams are having with each other. It's all
Hmm.
very well shifting the QA team's mindset to automation first, but what about the developers? What about the product team? You know, and it goes even further up than that, depending on some of the communication channels that you've got. So that's where I focus my attention now, is just fixing those conversations and, getting product owners to write tickets with an automation first approach, developers building something that's testable for the QA team. And I found that by fixing those conversations, that really helps. That is the main pain point to look at.
What was it? Because obviously, I'm guessing you didn't start in that place, though. So I'm sure you've had a lot of learnings along the way. So what was it that kind of was the thing that started making you think more around, actually, do you know what? It's bigger than just, this automation test suite or whatever it is that I'm looking at here. There's got to be something else going on. What's been that experience of learning around that?
Yeah, so I think that the main thing that's pointed it out is having a team that is capable, that can work at the same speed as the developers, and we can see that they are building the tests. We have got this automation framework in place that the company wants, and we are delivering exactly what the company wants, but we are still not able to get ahead of the developers with the automation. We are still automating as an afterthought. So we're not there. And then it's just having a discussion with the QA team, with the testers, whoever it is that's building the automation, and say, where are our pain points? Why are we not able to develop our tests at the same time as development's going on? Why are we not building these before? We go through refinement, we go through Three Amigos, we go through all these different things, and we are still stuck building our tests after development has happened. And it's all come down to points like, the ACs aren't clear, we don't know what the workflow is, the product's being built without reliable locators in it. There's multiple like libraries being used that aren't necessarily testable because of how they've been built. So it's having that communication early on with the rest of the team to say, hey, look, this is what we need to do our job. Let's have a conversation about it.
And just to step into that a little bit more, Megan, because obviously I know through some of the conversations we've been having recently about sort of different levels of experience within a team, for example. So you may be inheriting a team or you may be growing a new team, but they're two different things, right? So if you're inheriting a team, the skill level that you may inherit may be vastly different to a team you may build with the mindset of, we know that we need to go down this automation route. So to then be able to have people that are even aware of some of these problems that you're talking about here to drive good automation, I'm assuming that's quite a challenge as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that is a challenge, and it's all an education piece. I mean, I was having this conversation today actually around, just simple things like, we've got automation in the pipeline. Why are you trying to run the test manually on your machine? Just go and look at the results from the pipeline and see what's ran there. To that education of team members that might not necessarily have that automation experience, or be looking at it from an automation first approach, you've got to take that into account in these conversations. And it's really taught me recently that I've really got to think differently with different team members, depending on their experience, depending which companies they've worked at, even because, when you're building a team from scratch and their experience, their skill level, you can work their abilities. But when you're inheriting a team, you've got to really think about, where are they coming from and how can I help them on this journey.
And each of those individuals are going to be, like I say, of a different, not only just of a different skill set, but to your point, different levels of experience outside of, it may be that they've only ever worked in that one company, but that's quite rare. That often you'll get people that have come from different organizations that have got different levels of experience, and what may mean one thing to them now may have meant something different to them then, and me and Vern talked about this recently on on the podcast that we did, that it's understanding the lie of the land at that point. So when you've got in your experience, when you've got say a mixed level, a mixed experience team, and you're trying to determine where the problems lies, you mentioned, like, we'll get onto the conversational side of things and fixing the other stuff in a moment. But even to be able to get to the point where you can determine that actually we don't need to start here with the test suite, we need to start outside of that, because clearly we haven't got all the information. When you've got that team that maybe isn't as experienced, how do you gather that in those insights to enable you to sort of then change tact a little bit?
Yeah, great one. So it's all around, again, it comes back to conversations. We can't progress if we're not having these conversations. And I am very, very hands-on with my team, whichever company I've been on, and I'm constantly having conversations with them about what they need to do their job and where they are. And what I've recently developed is an automation first maturity model so that I can
Okay.
have a very specific conversation with team members and say, this is where we need to be. Where do you think we are on this
Nice.
model?
Yeah.
And then they're able to put their feedback in, and we are able to look at what actions we need to then go up a level. And it's really interesting. And I actually used something recently that we spoke about, looking at it from different perspectives. So people perspective, process perspective, support perspective. And that has also highlighted certain points where conversations are breaking down. And it's coming back to shifting the mindset of the whole team having those conversations. So yeah, so in short, the answer to your
Yeah.
question is it's all about conversations, wherever you are in your process, whether you're at the beginning of your automation first journey or whether you're full on track, you're at the top of the maturity model, you still need to keep having those conversations and keeping those touch points in, and because everyone's going to have different pain points and those all need to be taken on board to get the full view all laid
Yeah.
around.
I like it. I like the thought of having some sort of model there that you can then use to help the team understand
Yeah.
where they are, but then also where they potentially need to get to, because that can help just guide those conversations, like you say, to then pull that information out. It reminds me of the quality radar when we was at the Test
Yeah.
Bash leadership day, and Nicola's quality radar is just kind of almost like, here's a guide to your conversation, almost like. So within the team, then you've got that type of model, which is great, because then you can start pulling out, okay, actually, do you know what? The problem's not here within the team. It's not here within the framework. It's not here within the tests. It's actually outside.
Yeah.
It's way before, like to your point, like the acceptance criteria or whatever. Once you gather that information, then how do you then take that information and then go and have those conversations with people outside of the team? Because often that's actually the much harder, from my experience, that's the much harder part, because you don't have that same level of connection. You don't have that same level of purpose, maybe, in that sense. So what's your approach to that? Or should I say, how has your approach changed maybe from how you originally did it to now?
Yeah, so I mean, those are the conversations I love having, the conversations outside the team where we can start driving change and getting input from other people. And anyone who works with me will say, I'm very stubborn. I will set my mind on something and I will just go for it. And
Yeah.
that is, my approach has changed slightly as I've matured in my career. I've always been very stubborn-headed, but now I'm kind of a bit more subtle, a bit more gentle. With raising those points. So I think it's just important to get everyone's buy-in. So before you enter any conversation around making any of these changes that you want to implement, you need to gather as much data as you can beforehand, before the conversation happens. You need to be able to say, this is why I want to do it, or this is why we want to do it, and kind of outline the benefits for not only their team, but all the other teams within the company itself. So you need to say, this isn't just impacting you, this isn't just impacting us, it's impacting all of us, and phrase it as a whole, that we're all working together to get this quality product. And we can't just leave it to one department to do their bit, another department to do their bit. It needs to be all combined, and that is kind of driving the conversation and using that focus for it.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. And I think it's having some sort of measure of impact so you can have that conversation is always really powerful. But I also find it really difficult sometimes to kind of measure the impact, because sometimes it's just a feeling. It's like, I know this is impacting the team because the team's frustrated, or are there any sort of measures that you've used to sort of drive some of those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough one, isn't it? Because everyone always asks for metrics, and it's always that whole concept of testing is a negative because everything else is a positive, and how do you get metrics for something that's a negative process? um So on the occasions where I can take metrics where it's down to like story points and
Hmm.
bug numbers and test numbers, that the things that, CTOs and stakeholders and stuff love, it's just trying to put across that we cannot do our job without this. These are the frustrations. It's more that it's impacting things negatively. So by not having clear and well-defined acceptance criteria, this is negatively impacting us because we're potentially going to get churn on stories. We don't know what we're automating, so it's going to take us longer to automate it. So it's trying to draw out what is going to happen if we don't do this, rather than focusing on what happens if we do have this, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah,
And I've seen it before. There was one company I worked in, we had massive churn on stories coming across. Like each story was going back to the devs 5 or 6 times a sprint. And we introduced a conversation point. It's just, let's have a conversation at the start of each ticket, talk about what we're going to test, how you're going to build it. And, instantly it dropped down to pretty much zero churn just by putting that conversation point in. And that's what I try and bring to any conversation about change. It's like, this is the pain point.
mm.
This is why we've got the pain point. And if we change it, this is potentially what's going to happen. But it's difficult to put metrics against it, isn't it?
Yeah. I think the metric side of things is something that is always difficult. I think, but what I'm hearing more there from what you're saying is it's kind of more telling the story, right? So rather than saying here's X amount of points or X amount of tests or whatever, it's actually the productivity is slowing down, the
Yes.
morale is dropping, the efficiency, all these different things, the effectiveness of the team, and you can package that however you want to, but it's the message and how you then tell that story is really important. And often it's just to try and get people to listen to start with. That's something I've found in these conversations, is if you can just get people to take that moment to listen and you have their ear, then the rest of the conversation can become a lot easier. It's just getting that, almost that hook to pull them in with to start with. So for example, you touched on a couple of things in just what you've been saying there, like sort of like Three Amigos. You mentioned like the Three Amigos approach earlier, briefly. And there's obviously, we want to talk here around how we improve communication, conversation throughout the whole process, of which there's many different people, of which there's many different roles, of which there's many different conversations, and they don't always happen at the same time. But what are some of the sort of the things that maybe you've introduced to try and bring people together more, so that they are collaborating better, they are aligning those conversations more, they're more timely? Because often I've found it's the timeliness of the conversation. So conversation may happen, but it may happen too late. So is that something you've seen? And if so, how have you kind of gone about, what have you done to kind of make those conversations more timely and easier?
Is this in regards to like around Three Amigos in general, or
Well, Three
do you
Amigos
mean
is a
just in
way of
general?
doing it, isn't it? Which
Yeah,
is what you've referred
yeah.
to. But more generally, sort of just, are there any sort of techniques or approaches that you've taken? Three Amigos might be one of them, to bring people together, to kind of create those conversation loops or points and make sure that they're happening.
Yeah, so I mean, outside of Three Amigos and those more formal meetings,
Mm.
something I found that really helped improve communication earlier on in the process was, at one point we created a Slack channel where anything that was going to be in sprint planning the next day, we would post all the tickets to that channel. So the team
Okay.
had a chance to read them in advance, think about them, and start posting conversation points ahead, because in sprint planning there's a lot of people there, there's a lot of noise, a lot of conversation, and you can't always put your hand up in the meeting or shout your point across. It's quite difficult. So that was a really big improvement for us, posting those out and getting people's thoughts ahead of it, or just letting them think about it, so that when they did join the meeting they had their conversation already to bring across. So that was really good for conversation starting. And yeah, in addition to that, we've also had a Free Amigos channel where we have all our talk about planning stories and stuff, but it's not been closed. It's not been a closed conversation. So anybody can look and see what's happening in that channel. So it's all about visibility, isn't it? And communication. So keeping as much as possible visible. And then, if you get into a sprint and you've missed something and the conversation is happening later, then you can address, well, you've had all of these opportunities to talk about it. Why were they not raised earlier? Was it that something wasn't uncovered until development started or testing started on something? And then if it is that, then you can look at changing the conversation there as well and developing whatever else you need in place to fix those points that are missed later on.
I like that idea of giving people visibility before they go into like a planning session, and that just give them time to think. I've been in planning sessions where literally like the first time you see a ticket is in that room and you're like, well, I've got to process this thing now. I've got to think about it. We've got to size it. We've got to create like some acceptance criteria. We've got to do all these things. And honestly, like a few years ago when I worked at EasyJet, we used to have 2 days of planning, 2 full days of planning, and it was like, if only we did something like that then. May have at least saved a whole day. So I'm a big believer in giving, because one of the things that I've learned over the years is, and I'm so mindful of this nowadays, is that everybody learns and takes in information at their own pace in their own way. So to put people on the spot in a room like that can be really challenging for people. So some people are fine with it, but so to create these different ways that people can sort of take time, read through stuff, process it, gather their thoughts, then come to a conversation and a session, I think is so important.
Yeah, I've seen it make so much difference to so many people. There's been I've had people come to me, like team leads come to me and say, this person's very quiet, this person never speaks up in a meeting and stuff like this. And you have conversations with them, and it turns out that there are reasons why they don't feel confident to speak up in a meeting. So by having that visibility earlier, and by allowing people to ask questions over Teams or over Slack instead of necessarily speaking up in a meeting, I think that's quite empowering for those sort of people that can't speak up or can't feel that they can speak up for certain reasons.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Have you evolved how you capture the outputs of those conversations? Is it predominantly in tickets, or have you started capturing them in other ways as well?
I try and capture any conversation within the ticket itself. And it's the same as well. I've been, putting all my test evidence in the tickets as well, so that, if you come back to it like in a month or something and you're like, oh, why did we do that? You can look and you've got the whole conversation stream there logged in a ticket, and you don't need to go searching around different places. It
Yeah,
makes it a lot easier.
yeah, and I'm assuming then obviously that any of your team members, regardless of their experience level, have got the information there, and
Yes.
then they can ask more questions if they need to for more clarity. But they can take that information in a much cleaner, crisper way to then drive that automation approach that that we started talking about at the start of the show. Um, One of the things I'm interested in is when you start getting into trying to improve the conversations between, say, the team and the product owner, or the team and a business representative, whoever that may be. Have you ever had pushback, or have you ever had kind of like that? Well, you've got the story, what more do you want? That's it. That's all you need, right? Have you ever had that struggle? I've been in that situation and I found it really frustrating. I'm not going to lie. Not over more recent times, but definitely in previous teams that I've been in, where it's kind of gone, well, here you go. This is what we want. Crack on. And the conversations have been quite closed off. So have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, I have. Obviously, loads of times. Obviously, more towards the start of my career than more
Mm,
recently. But definitely, there's been so much pushback, and it's not necessarily been pushback from product owners or business representatives. There was one company I worked in where we were introducing Gherkin, and we're like, this is going to make it a lot easier for us to test. Let's use this. And there's been like pushback from devs saying, oh, we don't want to be told what the workflow is. We just want to be told what you want, and then we can work it out ourselves. So there's been pushback from that angle, but then obviously also pushback from product owners, for example, saying, we don't want to do that. I just want this story to be an open conversation within the sprint for people to talk about and discuss and then implement and test how they see fit. And it's like, that's great. Um,
yeah.
but it's going to make our jobs very difficult. So it's very much what I have learned is the most important thing in having these sort of like difficult conversations, if you want to call them difficult, is being very aware of other people's opinions and the places they might be coming from. And it's remembering that everyone's opinion is valid, even if it's not the path you want to go down. They might have valid reason and you need to listen to that. And if you can listen to their point and address their concerns, then you're more likely to be able to bring them on board to your way of thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, that was almost like what you was talking about there about just this. We just want this to be a conversation in the sprint. That's kind of going the extreme the other way, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, I don't think I've ever been in that situation where we haven't had anything sort of documented to that point. But yeah, that would be interesting to see how the team sort of fly by the seat of their
Yeah.
pants a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you touched on the sort of the human element of what we do just then around taking time to understand people. The communication that we're talking about improving is obviously between human beings. Everybody's unique. Everybody has their own way of communicating. One of the things that I've found and I've tried to get much, 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 much better at is obviously building empathy around, gathering that understanding of people, understanding where they're coming from, ensuring that I've got a good feel for how to best communicate to an individual in a particular way. But that takes time. That can take time. That can take effort, and sometimes it can be quite draining. In your role in a leadership position, I'm really interested to understand how you've kind of approached that, because there's the element of people are kind of looking at you as a role model. So you've got a new team, you're building a new team. I know this because we talk on a regular basis. So how do you approach that sort of like with building relationships with people, building empathy with people, when often you're the one that's having to put in a lot of that work and it can be quite tiring?
So I'm so glad you asked that question because I'm actually writing a talk on it at the moment.
There you go. It's almost like we planted
So
it. We didn't.
yeah. So taking a step outside of testing, outside of the tech industry, I have been a student of Aikido since I was 16.
Okay.
And this is a very, very interesting martial art, and it's all about not opposing your opponent. It's all about putting yourself in your opponent's place, and you blend with them. I don't know if you know much about
I
Aikido.
don't know. No.
So basically, it's just diverting your opponent's energy to where you want them to go, and
Okay.
putting yourself in their place.
Yeah.
My sensei, Quentin Cook, who's an amazing human being, he focuses on how you can take Aikido principles off of the mat and put them into your daily life. And this, I use a lot of these principles when I work in horse racing to help me blend with the horses and get the best out of them and all sorts. And I take those exact same principles to my work with the QA people, with anybody I work with. I take the same principles, and that is how I kind of get that empathetic approach. I try to put myself in their shoes. So like if I'm talking to a developer, I'm thinking, okay, they've just spent a week working on this piece of functionality. I can't just dive in and criticize it with bugs. I've got to talk to them about it. And it's the same, looking, like you say, building this new team. I've got to put myself in that team's place. They've been around for a while. I've come in, I'm new. I need to respect their opinions, that they've got a lot more experience of the product than I do. You need to respect those opinions. So that's what it comes down to. Whenever I talk to somebody, whoever it is and whatever we're discussing, I will always try and put myself in that person's place so that I can truly understand where they're coming from, and that makes those conversations a lot easier.
Nice. I like that. Do you know what? I didn't know you did that. Not like as in the workplace, but I didn't know what you did outside. So yeah, that's really interesting. I'm gonna have to go and look that up now to
That's
see
very
what
cool.
it's like. Yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool. And I like the fact that you're able to, like you say, your sensei is able to help you understand how you can actually take that from the mat into everyday life. And you hear that a lot around like martial arts and those types of things where you can apply those same techniques and that thinking and that mindset And we talk a lot about this with the coaching, right? Coaching skills can be used anywhere and anyhow. We just choose to apply them in a particular way at a particular time. So that's really interesting. I'm very interested to see you're writing a talk on this, did you say?
I don't know. Rosie inspired me when I was talking to her the other
Good
day.
old
It's like,
Rosie.
yeah, I know.
Well done, Rosie. I know you're listening. So yeah, that would be good. I'm excited for that. Excellent. Oh, that would be cool. Brilliant. So have you been in a situation whereby we've talked around the team, we've talked around sort of the broader team, so the product team and maybe sort of like your business representatives and stuff like that. What about the next level? What about the big people, the senior leadership, and like depending on the size of the organization, that could mean director level, that could mean CTOs. Those sort of conversations can be different. They can be a bit harder. Have you ever had to step into that kind of thing before? With just more with regards to helping them understand, maybe we're not ready for this yet. Maybe we need to focus in some other areas, because I'm seeing this a lot in conversations I'm having, particularly with AI right now, right? So there's a lot of people I'm speaking to that are saying we're getting pressured to adopt AI, embed it into our automation and do this, do that, but we don't think we're ready. And they're not that comfortable with having those conversations back. And the messaging is coming down from a sort of a more senior level. So I'm interested to understand, have you been in that situation? If so, what's sort of been your approach to that? Just to help anybody that might be listening that may be facing into something similar.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a very wide experience of very different feedback from CTOs, investors, and all the big dogs that you speak to. A lot of them have been very enthusiastic about what I've mentioned, the improvements I want to make, processes we want to change and stuff. They've been very, very on board, and I'm very lucky that I've been able to have those very open conversations with them. There have, of course, everyone's going to have disagreements somewhere along the line. It's not all beautiful roses everywhere all the time, and there have been times where certain upper management have said, well, why can't you just automate everything? It will make us so much quicker. And it's like, you can automate everything, but you won't have a quality product. You don't know what bugs you are going to be releasing out, and it's kind of just making sure they understand that it's like we can automate all of the functionality, but in order to have full confidence that our users aren't going to hit any weird unknowns, we need to at least do some exploratory testing on this. So it's just, again, like I've mentioned earlier in the other conversations, it's listening to their concerns and what they are asking you to do, and saying, okay, we can do that, but if we do that, this is going to be the potential negative impacts. And then giving them an alternative solution that will be like, okay, we can do 90% of this, but 10% of it needs to be how we want to do it to make it work. So it's just trying to come to an agreement, like, so not fully going down the path they want you to, but taking that on board and doing as much as you can, but making them fully aware of what that means later down the road.
Yeah. No, that does make sense. And I've had similar conversations with senior leadership, in those, it's almost like finding that middle ground or that compromise, but taking them on that journey to help them understand, because obviously they've got their ambitions, they got their visions, and from a bigger picture, and we don't always have that context as well. And it's something that I've always sort of tried to be mindful of, and always talk to my teams about, when maybe the team is getting frustrated with senior leadership. It's like, yeah, but you don't have all the context. I don't have all the context. So there's more to it than just what we know. And sometimes that can't be shared either. So you have to be very mindful of that. Coming to those conversations in a balanced way, I think, is really, really powerful. Am I right in thinking in your current role, you're predominantly remote? Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, pretty much. I think I've been into the office once since I've been here.
yeah. Have you found that that's made things easier or more difficult from a conversational perspective? And actually improving the conversations across the sort of the overall team or the overall system that you're sort of trying to manage?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because I think it's made some conversations easier, but it's made a lot of conversations more difficult. It's kind of like, when you're in an office, you're all just working there at your desks. You can quickly just turn around to the person next to you and have a 5-minute conversation and then go back to your work, and that problem is solved. Remotely, you've got to like schedule a meeting in the diary or wait for someone to be free. Oh, and then you're not free because you've been pulled into a different call. So so you've got to schedule a conversation rather than having those just naturally free flowing conversations that you'd have if you were in an office together. But then from my perspective, so I am somebody, that needs time to review what's going on, gather evidence, gather data. For me, scheduling these conversations means I can put a lovely agenda together in the conversation and say, these are the points I want to cover, this is what I want to talk about, and these are my expected outcomes. So it makes those, when you have got a conversation that's going to be difficult, it makes it easier because you're going into the meeting knowing these are the points you're going to discuss. The other people that are coming into that meeting, they've been advised in advance of what you want to discuss and what you're expecting the outcomes to be. So, it's more structured, and you can come away and take actions away to then go and work on.
Yeah, I like that, because I get frustrated when people just put stuff in the diary and then it's like there's no agenda, there's no nothing. I don't know what this conversation's really about. All I know is I've got to turn up at that time. And then you spend the first 5-10 minutes talking about what you want to achieve out of the conversation. Or worse, somebody will say, "Have you got 5 minutes?" and leave it like that. And you're like,
Yeah.
actually, from a leadership perspective, have you learned not to do that? Because I have, because it freaks people out completely. Have you got spare 5 minutes? Immediately the alarm bells start going, and so I deliberately I don't do that anymore, because having had it done to me a few times, it's like I don't like it. I don't like it. But because I find it interesting when you're remote, it can be really easy just to kind of get into this mindset of I'm going to send them a message rather than I'm going to try and speak to them, okay, face to face, but you know what I mean, like and we can get quite lazy sometimes. It's like you can it's almost like fire and forget, isn't it? I'll send a message and then I'll just crack on. I'll wait for them to come back and then I'll send another message, and then whereas actually it's really easy, it's a lot easier to go, can we just jump on a quick call? But then you've got the diary conflicts, and then you've got all the so it's trying to recreate almost a level of that in the moment, turning around in your chair, like you say, having a conversation, turning back, trying to do that a few different ways. Maybe it might be send a message to start with, and then if you're not getting anywhere, then say, "Can I jump on a call?" or whatever that looks like. But I still find it interesting for the dynamic of remote working and how the conversational side varies so much.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Still not. I don't think we've quite got it right yet. But we'll get there. I'm sure we'll get there. Another 10 years of complete remote working. I think we'll have nailed it down. I think we'll be perfectly fine. So we've covered quite a lot, Megan, in the time we've been speaking. Is there anything more that, from your perspective, that you'd want to leave the audience with on this topic?
Yeah, well, I think, the main takeaway for me is that, if you want to improve your test suite, have a little conversations first before you dive into fixing that, because there might be problems outside of that test suite that are preventing you from working at your full.
Nice. Brilliant. So this has been really interesting, Megan. Honestly, I've learned a lot about you, and I've been talking to you for quite a while as well. I've learned even more just by you coming on the podcast. So that's been great, and I think there's so much more we can dig into around these different areas, because we've touched on a lot of different aspects of the whole delivery cycle, in terms of the conversations you're having with different people at different times, what that then looks like throughout the flow, what the impacts are of those things. But this has been really great, Megan. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience with everybody. I'll definitely be getting you back on to talk more around some of this, most definitely, because you've got a wealth of stories. I know this for a fact, and I know that you're going through a lot of change in your role and you're experiencing a lot of new stuff and having some real success stories as well. So you'll definitely be coming back on. I know this for a fact. Yeah. So no, but thank you very much, Megan, for joining. Thank you everybody for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation that me and Megan have been having. Hopefully you got some great insights that you can take away and use in your teams to drive better conversations. Remember, start with the conversations, not the test suites. That's the glowing message that Megan's shared this evening. But that's it for this episode. Hope you've enjoyed it. Please keep subscribing, please keep sharing, please keep commenting, and join us next time on another episode of Quality Talks podcast. Take care for now.